This is the new Hyundai Alcazar. Of course, it's a camouflaged car, but there are a few details that I can share with you. One of them is that the Alcazar will sit in a very niche space, one between the Creta, the existing Creta, and the Tucson. Now, that's a space that there aren't too many players in that space, because this is a 7-seater or a 6-seater as well SUV. Three areas that I can talk about, and I should be talking about largely. Since you can see, this is a camouflaged car, so I can't tell you much about how it looks, but what I can say is that there is a fair amount of refreshment at the front end. It's a fairly different looking car in terms of there are some embellishments on the front end, on the grille, that are very different from the standard Creta. Closer to the launch, I'll have more details on how that looks, but some details around the headlamps, the grille is what has changed. Now, significant changes, of course, is that this is a much longer vehicle than the Creta, the Alcazar. The wheelbase has been extended. Now, the standard Creta stands at about 2,610 mm length between the wheelbase, which is in the front axle and the rear axle. But in the Alcazar, you've got about 2,760 mm of wheelbase length. And that essentially means there's been several structural changes to the chassis of the Creta to expand and extend the length of the car and enable it to seat, or rather put 7-seat configurations or 6-seat configurations in the interiors. Now, I can't show you the interiors because that's under embargo restrictions on that. This effectively gives fairly larger amounts of space inside the cabin. I've sat inside the cabin, I've driven the car, it feels nice, it feels good to drive. But having extended the wheelbase, the track hasn't really increased in length, and that means you could have an unstable body. And to counter that, what Hyundai has done is beefed up the suspension. So there's on the rebound, there are rebound dampers, of course, put in, so there's lesser rebound for that matter. It feels a lot more stiffer, a lot more composed, not more than the Creta, but certainly for a 7-seater whose length has been extended, the rebound is phenomenal. It feels good to drive over bad surfaces, even in corners. It's a fairly taut, well-sprung car, so there isn't any instability that you will feel while driving. Additionally, the steering also has been worked on a little bit. There's a little bit of tweaking in there as well, and this effectively gives it a little more control, lesser body roll, though yes, as a large SUV, and if you've driven and experienced the Creta, you'd know how much of body roll is there in that, though it's something that can be completely ignored. Other elements that the Alcazar has got is the utilization of about 75 or 76% of advanced high-strength steel and high-strength steels, and that makes it a far more stiffer chassis, a far more stiffer body. There's been some tweakings in those departments as well, including a few of the joints. Wherever there are critical joints along the car, those weld spots have, again, advanced technologies to ensure those welds are really tight, very, very firm. Again, this makes the body a lot more rigid, so reduces body roll, gives it the kind of stiffness and ride quality that you would want in a vehicle of this sort. Now, if you look clearly, that's the larger part. This has been increased by almost 15 centimeters, which is a fairly large amount of space to increase in length. But for the rear passengers, the third row, you've got the quarter glass area. It's a fairly large glass area and gives you good visibility inside the car, so you don't feel claustrophobic. There is enough of sunlight getting into that cabin. It feels fairly comfortable inside once you're seated in that third row. Word of caution over here though, that third row ideally should be for children, not for full-sized adults. It could be a little more uncomfortable for full-sized adults. Now, there are a few changes at the rear as well. The tail lamps have changed. Again, that's the one area that has been kept bare, but it really doesn't show you much with this camouflage about what the rear looks like. Not very different from the standard Creta, but yes, a new set of tail lamps, and of course you've got the Alcazar badging running across that chrome strip on the boot. Alcazar gets a 2-liter petrol engine. Now, this is from the NU family of engine. It's not a new family of engine. It's been there in existence for almost a decade now. But the 2-liter petrol is there under the hood. It's got a combination of both automatic and manual transmissions mated to it, and there's also the 1.5-liter diesel, which you've seen on the Creta. But the petrol makes about 159 PS of max power with close to about 190 Newton meters of torque. It's turbocharged, direct injection, so you don't really get the sense of it being underpowered. There's enough of power and enough of torque for you to put a full complement of passengers inside that cabin and take this out for any drive anywhere within urban areas or on highways also for that matter. The diesel is about 115 PS, but it makes a huge amount of torque, almost 250 Newton meters of torque. And that's also much better, of course. The drivability in the diesel would be far better than what you would get on the petrol. Now, having said that, both the automatic manual transmissions are quite nice transmission options for this matter. It's a standard torque converter. There isn't a dual clutch system on this, so which means the variants, you won't have something like the sport variant that you'd seen on the Venue, the turbo variant that you'd seen on the Venue, or even for the matter in the Creta. Besides that, now there are a few changes on the interiors. Again, I can't talk much about that. I can't really show that to you until the time of launch. But this is the Alcazar, fairly promising. I think the price positioning will be a little more upmarket from where the Creta is, but falling well short of where the Tucson is positioned. It should be a fairly good proposition for those looking out for a 7-seater. People with larger families will certainly get the kind of comfort and convenience that a 7-seater has to offer. The door areas, especially the rear, now if you look at it, it gives you a slight indicator. The door openings have been widened, have been enlarged compared to the Creta, and this is principally to allow better ingress and egress to the inside of the cabin, to that third row especially. Now the middle row, that can be folded forward, it tumbles down and opens up enough of space for you to get into that third row. When you don't need the seating space, all the seats fall down flat, so you've got a fairly large cargo area. So there you have it. These are some of the critical changes. Yes, the Alcazar will also ride on 18-inch wheels and tires. That's another important change that's come about. Unlike the 17 inches that you get on the Creta, the Alcazar starts from an 18-inch on the top end trims. We haven't revealed what the entire trim list is like, so we don't know what is going to be available on that. But 18 inches is the car that we are seeing here today. Now, I've seen the car without the camouflage. Interesting looking vehicle. Looks nice, looks promising, and well, let's see what the Alcazar can do in the Indian 7-seater SUV space.